Welcome to episode 22 of Drew's College Athlete Spotlight here on this Tuesday night. If you're watching live from YouTube or Twitch, myself, Drew Skyberg, is joined alongside a Division III wrestler from Stevens Point. Jade Herzer is that athlete. Here is Jade for episode 22. Jade, how are you doing on this Tuesday night?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to chat with you tonight and be in this experience.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun here. We'll have you right for the round. We like to keep these around like 25, 30 minutes. We'll see how it goes from there. And yeah, we're going to be talking, of course, about your high school, grade school level, how you got into wrestling, and then talk about how you end up here at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. We had a UW Milwaukee athlete on last episode, and here we go. We end up in the UW system still, but we're going to go down to Division III in the WEAC conference with Stevens Point. And yeah, Jade, to get started here, we're going to go back to, the area where you're from, Wisconsin Dells, right? I mean, we're going to talk about like the grade school, high school area. I guess what sports were you first playing? What was the first sport you were playing?
First sport I did was wrestling, but I did softball throughout middle school and high school and a little bit of volleyball in middle school, but
so when you started playing both, was wrestling always number one?
Wrestling's always been number one, yeah.
Okay, so I also got it. I just gotta get this out of the way. You grew up in Wisconsin Dells. How cool is that? Like, did you go to water parks a lot? Like,
yeah, I do. Usually, you find ways to sneak in, or you get some cheap deals here and there. People who work there, but it gets real busy in the summer. That's one thing that's always bugged me living there.
Yeah, I mean, but during the school year, it's probably more, not so busy. And then, of course, you have all the, like, right, the Kalahari, the wilderness. The list goes on.
Yeah.
But just, a great area to be around, of course, for some entertainment. But on the wrestling side, I'll get back on the topic here. But you mentioned you kind of started right away as first sport you were doing. Was that through, at that level, was it through a club? Was this through school?
There was a wrestling club. I started around kindergarten, first grade. So it was just a club at this building that Dells was renting. So it's just anyone who really wanted to join, and it just grew from there, really.
So was it from the Dells area? I guess how far out were people commuting for this?
I'd just say it was mostly Dells area kids. If there was some Mauston, like 20 minutes, 30 minutes maybe. But that was a pretty long time ago, so I don't really remember everyone who go.
But do you recall if was it a bigger group? Like, was there a pretty good turnout there?
Yeah, it was always a pretty good turnout. I mean, some days here and there, there'd be, few little kids. But most of the time, it was pretty good turnout.
Was that at the time co-ed, right? That would have been?
Yeah, co-ed.
I guess what year, or like, is that until high school or middle school? Because of course, like with like weight classes, I guess. How did that work with when does it become just like women's wrestling or like girls wrestling?
So actually I wrestled co-ed since I started wrestling till I graduated high school. If I when I continued to wrestle for my school, the only time I really wrestled only women was on my traveling team for Team Wisconsin.
Okay, for school, yeah, because the school was always you wrestled, it was co-ed, right? And then you mentioned club, and now in college it's also just like kind of like the club where it's only women, right?
Yep, it's just all women in freestyle. I
got you. Okay, so we'll talk about the club team, of course. Team Wisconsin is what you mentioned there, but and I guess the middle and high school levels, kind of what was like the train? Was it like practice 3 times a week, 2 times a week? What was kind of the routine there?
For the little kid club.
Just talking like middle school, yeah, for the club.
Oh, for middle school,
like,
yeah.
It was, yep.
Just like every day after school in the lunchroom, roll out the mats, and if you didn't come, you didn't come. It was just middle school, but I always wanted to pursue wrestling, so my dad would, always tell me I'd have to go every day after school.
What was it like? I'm gonna ask at these levels too, because you're still playing softball, I guess, even with like middle school. Like, were you wrestling year round? Was this something softball started? You took a break from wrestling. How did that go?
So I did wrestle year round, and if wrestling came in front of like a softball tournament, I would miss the softball tournament for
Okay.
wrestling. So my coach always, I've been with the same softball coach middle school till I graduated, and he's always understood that my wrestling career has always been first. So that was never really a problem.
So Jade Herzer, wrestler since day one, is what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
basically.
because sometimes we've had softball athletes, we've had other athletes where it like it slowly kind of crept in where it was like, all right, this sport now is, I'm committing over this sport for certain events or whatnot,
Right.
and well, in your case too for high school, I guess kind of moving up the ladder here. Um, of course, wrestling being in the winter and softball being in this for at least school in the
Hmm.
spring. You were fortunate enough, right? Those didn't really overlap with each
Yeah.
other, so that's at least a plus. And I guess let's move up to the high school level here,
Okay.
and we're gonna talk kind of about. We'll just touch on, right. I mean, the training's kind of my big thing. Were you doing right practice every day? Was it kind of that similar
Yeah,
aspect?
similar.
Meet wise,
Practice.
were you guys doing like meet twice a week, once a week?
We usually did a meet once a week, and it was on Thursday nights in high school.
Okay, pretty. Of course, WIA pretty similar.
Yeah,
The
and then
same
like
around the
the
state.
weekend tournament, or if that came up.
Yeah, I really want to touch about this club stuff, right? It was Team Wisconsin, and could you just talk kind of, like this was this going on like during, was this going on during the school season, or did they give you the break during the school season?
So Team Wisconsin usually freestyle hit around March, and so still wrestling folks out too. So I really didn't get a break. I was traveling to Body Bar in Texas during like towards the end of folk style, but there still would be practice. But my coaches knew that I was on a women's team, and they knew I was wrestling, so they basically like let it slide, and I'd come back and just continue to train with the boys, and then I'd go to freestyle practices somewhere held in River Falls. It really depended. Like they would try to meet like other women's needs on like how far they would drive, so it kind of depended on the place. But I'd go to practices sometimes after my men's practice in high school. So yeah, it was pretty
Wow.
busy back
So
in
you're
the
doing
day.
potentially two wrestling practices a day in some days, right?
Yeah, some days, yeah,
And
it was tough.
regarding Team Wisconsin for the women's team, I know you mentioned, right, you guys would meet different places based on where people were at. I guess I'm wondering where was it mainly based out of? Like, was there a main home base?
I'd say the home base was River Falls. They had the high school there, and we were coached by Kevin Black for a while, so that was his main
Okay,
spot. So we would all come to him, and it was a pretty big place. It was a long drive for me, um,
how
but
long?
3 hours. I mean, 3 hours is pretty long. I feel like.
Oh, 3 hours. Wait, I mean that is really long.
Yeah.
I'm just so I'm understanding this. What time did Wisconsin Dells High School get done with school on their on days?
3:30.
So you got done at 3:30. You had practice probably, what was it, like 3:45 to 5 something?
Yeah.
What was it?
So yeah,
So you're telling me you would drive there 3 hours for practice on weeknights? You'd get there at like 8?
it would depend. If it was in River Falls, sometimes we would skip it, but I did do it maybe like twice, a couple times. But
Okay,
those were.
so what time were these practices starting at River Falls? Was it like 8 o'clock you
I
started?
would be I would be a little late always. But I would.
Understandably so.
Yeah, we would stay late. My coach always understood though, because obviously in high school you do have a team and you want to try to make conference champs, and so he understands I was working for that too. And I was doing pretty good for my spot on Team Wisconsin, so I wasn't really worried about anyone taking my spot. So
Sure. And I guess I'm wondering, like, what time were you getting back on these weeknights?
pretty late. And then I had to ride the bus, and I live out in the country, so wake up at 4:30. My dad would make me work out. Then I'd have to shower, wake up my two younger siblings, then get on the bus at 6:05.
So
So
would it be fair to say it was probably around 1 a.m. you were getting back? Maybe later?
yeah, it would be. Yeah, it was pretty late.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do you know the furthest drive for someone where because I don't think you would have been the furthest. I mean, River Falls is
No,
kind of.
I wouldn't be able to pinpoint the furthest, but I know there were some girls who maybe might have been a little more dedicated than me to driving to these camps, just because I didn't really come from money, so sometimes it really did depend on how much gas we could get. Because my dad was picking me up from school all the time, and he was driving to work. So I know some women on the team definitely had a little more money than me, so probably that didn't really bother them as much. But
Yeah, I'm thinking like
pretty
considering it was that part of the state, there's probably some people, like from Appleton, from Green Bay, probably from those areas, and that's that's a hike and a half. Same for
yeah,
I mean, multiple hikes is probably the better way to
yeah,
put it. But
it was a pretty big team back in the day.
we'll go back. We'll go back to the high school season here, and we'll touch on right. I mean, was there any teammate on your high school team? I mean, you mentioned was there any other girls on the team, if I may ask, for the high school?
Yeah, so my friend Eliza Leonard, she goes to North Central now and wrestles. We were the two girls on the team for the longest time, until her little sister, actually Alicia, joined when she was a freshman, and then now we have another girl, Lydia, who joined not too long ago, but has still continued to join. So that's nice to see that there are still girls joining the Wisconsin Dells wrestling team. Not as
That's
much
great
as
to
I would
see.
like, but we're still filtering some
Get
in.
that up, right?
Yeah.
You can be a role model, and you can, of course, motivate the younger ones to join the wrestling team.
Mhm.
And I want to ask about a teammate at the high school level and a coach. Was there someone who stood out for you, who kind of motivated you to get you where you are right now at Stevens Point?
I would definitely say my practice partner, Will Van Dinter. He never hesitated to be my partner. He was always he was a lightweight, but never really saw like weight difference. He still practiced with me every day. Never really cared that I was a girl ever in the beginning. So Will Van Dinter, my bestie, and then his dad
Awesome.
was our one of our coaches, Joey Van Dinter. Supported me since day one, always in my corner. Like I said, he never really saw like that I was a girl in wrestling, just saw me as a wrestler. So that was always nice to have.
And that's what you want. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask here about like, kind of moving to the college bit here. When you were competing with Team Wisconsin or, of course, with Wisconsin Dells, did you have that moment where you're like, hey, I can do this at the next level? I want to wrestle at the collegiate level?
Yeah, I've always thought about it. Like wrestling college was one of my biggest like goals. It didn't really matter where I went, honestly, because one of my also main goals is helping this sport grow, and getting women into wrestling. So I always just thought of myself going into college and joining a women's wrestling team would help because my name is pretty known like in Wisconsin. And so I just thought like that was always just a thought in the back of my head. Like just helping the sport has always been like my biggest priority is getting it to grow and to show women that it is like a good sport. It's good for like any aspect in life, really. It teaches you so much. And so that was just always one of my priorities.
And we love that here, right? I mean, this very own podcast. That's what I mean. The series is about. It's about showing other sports. It's about showing, hey, look what these athletes have done. Look what they've overcame, and look where they are today. So, at the right spot here, Jade. I guess the WIA they've kind of caught on too, right? I mean, did they have the women's wrestling tournament? Aren't they starting to? They had the state tournament for women.
Yeah, last year we actually attended. Some of the girls on my team here in Stevens Point, we attended to watch and support them. It was actually a great thing to see. It was nice getting something that we deserve after all these years, and especially from me seeing it going to state and sharing a stadium with the boys and having to split it, girls on this side, boys on this side, and it's always just nice to see like what these women are getting.
Yeah, I just hope now, right? Other states, of course, the goal, see what Wisconsin's doing, see what other states are doing.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can have all 50.
That would be
that in. And I want to go, okay, recruiting process. So we'll touch on that. So, right, I mean, you're through the wrestling season, I guess. Kind of what offers were you getting? Kind of where were they? And then we'll talk about why Stevens Point. I mean, you mentioned Wisconsin.
So I didn't really look for that many colleges just because My GPA in high school wasn't always the best, and yeah, I had not really the best of luck. And so Stevens Point, I looked at Stevens Point, North Central, and that was basically my top two picks, and really the only places I would want to go to wrestle. Um, North Central is in Illinois, Naperville, Illinois. They have a fantastic program. It's great. So I went on tour there, and I got a little offer for money, because it was a little expensive for my family. As you know, we don't come from a lot of money, so I had to sit on that because I was looking at Stevens Point, which is only an hour away from my house. And I'm a huge family person. My dad is my best friend. I could never imagine like moving to like a different state without my dad. And so that was one of my big things about going to college, was being super close to my dad. And Stevens Point gave me that. And I've known the head coach now, Jake Wozniak, for years. He helped with the women's Wisconsin team for a long time. And then our old coach, Jessica Rotier, she also coached me at Fargo for the 2 years that I went. So it was nice to know that I had people there. And I think that's what really sold me. And I wanted to help the program grow a lot more, because they only had like 7 girls when I went on my tour. And I thought, if I go, hopefully that brings in a lot more girls. And so that's basically why I picked Stevens Point. And it's a little cheaper.
It looks like it has. I mean, we'll talk about the roster, but I'd say it's triple that
Yeah,
7 number you mentioned.
we recruited a lot of girls this year.
Wow.
A lot.
Yeah, we'll
Locker room
touch
is
on.
filled.
It is a filled roster. It's a young roster too.
Yes,
will
very
gladly
young.
look into that. But yeah, you end up at Stevens Point. Some awesome, story, right? Being closer to your dad. I
Yeah,
didn't know Dells was only an hour away from Point. Really?
basically,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
an hour and 15 minutes.
That's great. Yeah, you can't. And I think Stevens Point's like 2 hours from where I live, and it's
Yeah,
like 2.5 from Milwaukee. So, you ends up being pretty close there, the
yeah.
Dells, and um, going through that, I want to touch, move to the college side here. So you end up at Stevens Point, and from there, freshman season, I guess I want to kind of touch on like the training is like where I always like to go right away. Jade, was the training from the high school to collegiate level? I mean, considering you were doing 2 practices a night, was it like how much did it ramp up? Was it more? How much more intense was it?
Um, for me personally, it was not that big of a difference, just because I did travel a lot, and I was on travel teams, so practices were pretty intense there because I was traveling with some of the best and training with some of the best here of women's wrestling, some of the girls. So, but I won't say it wasn't like easy. It was just basically I was prepared for it from prior experiences. There are some hard days though, especially when they make us do a lot of sprints. I've never been a sprinter, so those are always hard for me. But I wouldn't say it was really a big change. It was just I've just prepared myself for it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the volume that you're going through during a week, right? And yeah, I mean that was something. I do want to go backtrack a little. Just want to touch on this. I always like to bring up the fact, or like to talk with some athletes that kind of went through the pandemic, right? I mean, how did that work for wrestling? Especially with the club team you were with,
Yeah.
the travel team. Like, were you able to use that time, work out? Like, were you fortunate enough to work out at your home? Were you able to have a training program? How did that roll?
So when the pandemic hit, I unfortunately wasn't with Team Wisconsin anymore. I had just drawn myself away from them, but I was still with my high school team. And I am thankful enough to have my dad dedicate a room in our house for a wrestling mat and a wrestling dummy. And so thankful enough, I was able to practice in my own house and stay in shape. And then for high school, all we had to do was just wear masks during practice. That was pretty hard, but just thankful enough to have the opportunity to still be in school and wrestle, even with the mask. It was a little hard, but it's just something to overcome.
And you were able to get through your senior year, right? I mean, that ended up being your senior year with the masks.
Yep.
Okay. So, okay, we got through that, and we're now freshman year, Jade. We're at Stevens Point, and want to touch on just overall, right, that transition. For you, you mentioned it was pretty good transition, and the results speak to that. I mean, I just want to touch on like the Grandview Open last year, if you remember that.
Yeah.
I had a 4-in-1 day, and in the 170 bracket, he took second overall. I mean, as a freshman, talk
Yeah.
about success. Yeah, I guess was that one of your best showings of the year? Was there another one that stands out?
I did win one tournament last year. I think that might have been the Adrian Open. So that was very nice, especially for my freshman year. And I was the only person that weekend out of my team to win a tournament.
What,
Um,
what tournament did you say that was?
the Adrian Open is pretty early in our.
Adrian Open. Oh, so yeah, right away I see Adrian, Michigan. There we go.
Yeah.
You won
So that
that
was
one.
pretty nice,
Awesome.
especially with that year on my freshman year we had a lot of seniors, so it just felt nice as like a freshman, brand new. I came out and I showed out. I thought that was good.
And I want to correct myself too, because I mean I mentioned, like, of course Stevens Point is in the WEAC, right? I mean that's the
Mm.
conference they're in, but like, um, with women's wrestling, not every school, right, has a in the WEAC has a wrestling team, women's wrestling team. So you end up, is it the NCWWC? Is that kind of the conference you're in?
Um, I think it's just NCAA. I think that's like I'm not
Yeah,
really. Is that what you're saying? I'm not really
well,
with
like
the.
the NCAA, of course, is the whole. But I'm talking about, with, because like with the conference, it doesn't really look like there's like a specific conference for
Oh yeah,
wrestling, right? I mean,
no.
because like in
Let
high
me-
school you had, right, your conference,
yeah, in high school you
for,
had conference, but in college not. The boys do, but not women.
okay, so they don't have, because, right, of course the goal is to have the WEAC support women's wrestling, right? I mean, at the
Mhm.
end of the day, that's kind of like a goal, but um yeah, going through it. It was the Northwest Regional is what you guys were ended up being in last year, and I
Yeah.
see Stevens Point hosted that, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was nice. Us hosting it, and I think we are hosting it again. If I am.
We'll get to that. Let me pull that schedule up, but yeah, as you mentioned, you had some nice success. Of course, your freshman year here at Stevens Point, and
Mhm.
I didn't realize the Skyward Fieldhouse was the name there at.
Yeah, it's new.
So yeah, it's great to see that, and great facilities, as you mentioned, for wrestling. So
Yeah.
um, hey, let's talk about the 2022 to 2023 season here. We mentioned the roster. I want to get to that right away here. Right,
Okay.
it's a newer roster, and when I say newer, I mean excellent recruiting class comes in. I mean,
Mm.
that's you've got a great group of girls coming in, and just overall, were you able to connect with them right away?
I was. It was a little hard at first, just because most of the girls we recruited are new coming to wrestling and freestyle. They all had just the common denominator this year with our recruits is that they're just starting out, but they wanted to continue. So it was a little hard, but they all are great. I love my team this year. I think we bonded real fast, and they love to learn too. So it's nice to see in the wrestling room their dedication and their hard work to get better
You've been
every
able
day.
to you being a wrestler, your whole life, of course, had the experience, right, to lead by
Yeah,
example and educate, the newer wrestlers or ones who have less experience, of course. But you have some seniors, right? I mean, I'm looking. Is it, if my eyes don't deceive me, I see four seniors. Is
yeah,
that
4 seniors.
so? Again, a small group of seniors. It's a lot of underclassmen for the Stevens Point wrestling squad, and
Yes.
that's something. Of course, you look at, it's tough right now, right? I mean, having mostly freshmen and sophomore, but
Hmm.
we always talk, college. You see that 1 to 4 year development process. Year 3 and 4, you're going to see a lot more experience for the
Yep.
squad. But the 2022 season, right? I mean, we're in the 2022 part of the 2022 to 2023 season. You guys have had two meets, it looks like, so far, and you the Pointer Open already and
Yep.
the Adrian Women's Open. Did the Adrian Women's Open go as well as last year?
I did take second, so
Well,
no, but
but
yes,
it still went great. It's
right.
still. some good experience to get before. Not gonna say conference, but before some of these bigger right dual meets take place, or right. I
Yep.
mean, you got Carthage, coming up this Friday. You got to go Kenosha, so you're gonna be kind
Yeah.
of by me in Milwaukee here, and then you end up going to North Central College. You end up going to Naperville December 11th. Is that gonna be weird? Is that you're gonna wrestle against
Um.
your old teammate, right?
No, she is a couple weight classes below me, so
Well,
she.
I'm not saying wrestle. You're gonna wrestle. I mean, like in a team
Oh.
setting, not
Oh
like
no. We
individual.
honestly, that's another thing I love about women's wrestling is it's actually a great atmosphere. Everyone's like friendly, and so it's just really nice seeing like my old teammate and coming to her school. She went to mine at the Pointer Open, so
You get
it's
to
always
cheer her
nice.
on.
Yeah, it's
That's what
nice
I'm
to cheer
talking.
each
Yeah.
other on, just like in high school.
Is it you got the they give you a 9 a.m. one on a Sunday, and then sometimes like on the Friday one you got a 4:30. So you kind of get that school setting, or like even when it was like the after school meets or that Saturday Sunday tournament. So you still got
Yeah.
that, and I see we have Midlands December 30th. That's at Hoffman Estates, Illinois, and then we have you got to go to Louisville this year,
Yep.
or is that for? Does everyone go to that, or is that you got to qualify for the?
Everyone goes to that one. The
Okay,
only thing that you really have to qualify for is nationals,
okay,
which is
I got you.
March 4th and 5th.
So, how big of schools is that going to be? Only Division 3 schools, or will we see some D2, D1 programs at that multinational dual meet in Louisville?
There will be D2
Oh,
schools there. No, I don't know D1s. I don't. The only D1 I'm pretty sure is the Iowa Hawkeyes who just started, but I don't think they're competing for the 22-23 season. I think they're competing
okay,
23-24. So I don't know. They might go there as um uh undecided. I kind of forget. You can sign up for opens as like just an individual. So I know some girls did that at this most recent tournament in Minnesota. Was that the most recent one? Yeah.
Michigan, or I see.
Michigan.
Sorry. Yep.
Uh so I know a lot of I think like 4 girls went there as their own individual. They tore it up, so but I don't think
That's
they'll go to
awesome.
the Louisville one. But it's a big one. It's just a bunch of duels. We go against um everyone, go up the bracket, go down the bracket. Hopefully we're gonna do good this year because last year we kind of did not so good.
Well, you got a year of experience, right? A lot of you have a year of experience. I know a lot of new ones, but another year of experience here for most of you. And let's go through these other ones. You got to go to Des Moines, Iowa. Haven't touched on that one yet. I'm going a little over the place. You got Carthage comes to Stevens Point, and
Yeah.
then you go to North Central College again for a duel this time
Yes.
on January 11th or January 24th. That is, and then here I am. Where you gotta go? You go to Des Moines, Iowa, Saturday, February 4th. A lot of traveling. This year it seems more than
Yeah.
last year potentially.
I think we have two more new ones this year, but they are long drives, so it feels like a lot.
Yeah, and then you got Augsburg University at Stevens Point. That's a Thursday night at 7 p.m. Nice and late there. And then 10 a.m. on Saturday, that's where we see the Northwest Regional Qualifier. You do again. And the championships is March 3rd and 4th. That's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So,
Yes.
quite the, it ends up being, like Louisville's the furthest east, and then you get Iowa the furthest west. It ends up being kind of, they end up putting that like region, it seems. But
Uh-huh.
I guess,
Uh
is there a meet here you're looking forward to the most?
um I am going down to 55. I have been wrestling 70, but I've been walking around 58 for this whole sophomore year because I have been trying to cut down. So I'm just excited for the Augsburg one because the number one at 55, we are currently 1-1. And so I am excited to get down to a weight class I've been trying to get to wrestle her.
Awesome. So a nice little rivalry there.
Yeah.
And that'll be a good meet there. I guess I got a couple more questions here before we wrap up. I'm going to ask you these high school ones again, but I'm going to
Okay.
do it like this. Is there a teammate you want to shout out so far at the collegiate level? A coach? Let's hear it.
To shout out my teammate Roseanne Marshall and Olivia Hollenbeck. They're actually my neighbors in my dorm room. They've been my best friends since I came to Stevens Point. So they've always had my back. And then my coach Jake has been my number one supporter since he's known me. So it's nice to have my number one supporter in college too, as well as when I was traveling.
That's great. There's the teammate and the coach. All right, we're gonna do the academics. I didn't forget. I promise. I always like to include some academics in here. We can't just talk all about the sports as much as we want
Right.
to, but I want to ask you, Jade, here. What is your major, and with that, what's the long-term career goal with your major?
So my major is early childhood education, and for my long term, I just hope to teach anywhere. Honestly, I wouldn't mind moving somewhere warm to teach, but just to help the education program and get the education to the children who really need it most.
Do you have a preferred grade range?
Grade range, I'd say um like 4K, maybe like fourth grade. I think I'd be fine.
Okay, so the early range. I didn't know in early childhood if there's a specific range. Like you were like, I want to teach first grade. I want and have it all set in. But
No,
um,
I'm really not that picky. I know some people in the program, have their preferences, but
of course, and do you see then? Last question here is involving coaching, right? I mean, being in a teaching setting, it seems you'd be perfectly accessible to teach or not teach, but coach women's wrestling. Girls wrestling. Is that something you would want to explore in the future?
most definitely after my career wrestling is done for, and I retire my shoes, I definitely would love to continue to help women's wrestling and coach a team. And even when I am teaching and have a job, even coach like a high school team as a woman, maybe a men's team, just to show, there's really not that big of a difference in a male coach and a female, because everyone has certain
Exactly.
experiences. So I would just love to have continue coaching after my shoes are retired.
Yeah, you'll be a role model, as you mentioned, not just for the female wrestlers, but of course, right? I mean, all wrestlers, right? I mean, that's what that's great for the wrestling community, wrestling world, and
Mm-hmm.
some exciting stuff you're doing, Jade, in that community, that world, wrestling, of course, and that, with that, Jade, I want to wish you the best here academically and athletically here for the rest of the year.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck with the Stevens Point women's wrestling team. Good luck to the men's team. Good luck to all wrestlers, with that. And
Right.
anything else you have, Jade, here before we wrap it up on this Tuesday night?
I think I'm all set, and I appreciate you for having me.
Of course. It was a lot of fun here, Jade.
I
And yeah,
definitely
that's going to wrap it up here for Jade Herzer and myself, Drew Skyberg. Thank you all for listening to yet another episode of Drew's Sports Crew, the perfect podcast for you.